Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Samí Haiman-Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from You Do You.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of I Have Something to Say. I'm so excited because today, moi is going to learn something new because I have no idea about how this works. So we're going to talk about Bitcoin and about new trends in currency and how it works and all of that good stuff. And to talk to us about this topic, we have Joe and Mike. Welcome. They are with the nonconformist.io, which already I'm digging, this platform because of the name, because we like to challenge, right? Set boundaries and all of that stuff. And thanks, Chris, for making the introduction. I know that you guys are really good friends. I'm excited, I want to start right off the bat, with confessing that I'm a non-convert, there's a lot of skepticism just because I really don't know much about the subject. I did read a little bit, so that way I don't look that stupid. But in essence, Bitcoin is about digital currency. It's about and getting the banks and like big, right, financial institutions out of the equation to try to make the process of exchanging services and goods and all of this stuff more truthful or more, how do you say, unbiased and clean. Mm-hmm. And that's basically that's the big picture, what I got out of what I was reading about the subject, right? Am I on point? Or please,
you're so far.
Please educate me.
Joe got this, right?
Yeah, Joe, jump in. How does this all work?
How did this all start? First, let's backtrack. I know that you guys are like friends from way back. You went to the same, undergrad, and then you met up again at UConn to do your master's, and then that's when all of this came to fruition. Let's start with that. What is your background, and how did you get into wanting to learn and really be involved in like this world of digital currency that is right now being talked about, and for some a viable option for economic progress and all of that?
Yeah, Sammy, and Chris, thanks for having us on the show again today. We really appreciate it. It's never been more important in the world than today, especially what's going on in the United States with the current economic crisis we're dealing with here, and then also globally within other countries. So Mike and I are both Army veterans. Mike and I met in our undergraduate degree at Central Connecticut State University here in Connecticut.
Thank you for your service, guys.
Hey, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, back then I was going through my finance degree at the school. And, right after finishing with my undergraduate degree, I moved on to working for a Fortune 20 company here up in Connecticut within manufacturing, the Department of Defense Space, and also the airline industry. So I've held various financial planning and analysis roles. I've worked in treasury. I've been there, done that on the finance side. About 2 years ago, so we're in 2020 now, so we're talking 2018, towards the middle of 2017. I was doing a deep dive into emerging technologies and disruptive technologies that we could be looking at in the coming, 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And this was, after the last housing crisis had happened, and Bitcoin was what came to mind. Also, within my company at that time, there had been more talk about digital currencies, not from a perspective of payments yet, the company expecting it from payments, but there was talks about the underlying technology itself and how it might be used within the business in the future. So that's what really sparked up my interest in Bitcoin and the technology itself, because I said, here I am, a young financial analyst in this massive company, and I'm listening to, a lot of the top finance executives. These are some of the most well-respected individuals in the world in finance talking about this new technology. Let me find out what it is, why it was created.
Yeah. And it's been around, but it's been around for a while. So this is not something new. You were just, studying, starting your career and everything. And then this thing just kept on popping, and you were involved in this industry. And so you're like, let me take a deeper dive into this. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is Bitcoin itself, and we'll talk about Bitcoin as primarily today, although there are others that we do, we would love to talk about. But Bitcoin was started in the heart of the last financial crisis. It was created by an anonymous individual, someone that went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. And there's a lot of debate in the community now. Who was Satoshi? What were they? It doesn't matter ultimately, because the actual Bitcoin technology itself is open source. So this individual, or this group of individuals, after the last housing crisis in 2007, essentially came up with an incredibly innovative way for us to decentralize currency and transaction value on the internet. So, and I want to back up first, understanding why the last housing crisis happened. And if we remember, it was essentially because of the banking industry. Right. So there was a lot of subprime mortgages. There was loans and fraudulent lending that took place, very risky lending, that ended up leading to the collapse in the housing industry, right? Because people couldn't pay mortgages, there was defaults that all came back down. All right. So Bitcoin was launched in 2008 as a response to that. Now here we are 10 years later going through another financial crisis, and Bitcoin is actually preserving the wealth of individuals today. But what we need to do along with this, though, is understand what is money, right? What is money ultimately? And money in the United States, our dollars up until 1971 was backed by gold. What that meant is that, the United States government could only spend as much gold as it had, right? And it couldn't spend any more of that. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, and that's arguably when this experiment of paper money, fiat currency is what we call it, started. And the dollar today exists in a world where as much of it can be created. It can be inflated away. We look at the Federal Reserve Bank over the last 2 months, and the first round of liquidity that's been given in the response to COVID-19 has been a figure of $6 trillion created.
And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, wait a second, I thought we were tight and we were in deficit and all of these other needs that have been around, right, forever and ever. And then now all of a sudden there's money?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, really? Anyway, okay, I'm sorry. It's just that, I was so angry. But anyway, go ahead.
And you have the right to be. You have the right to be, and it's really economics and finance aren't really taught that well in school, and especially if you're not attending a business school. So not many people really understand where the dollar comes from, how our economy functions, and how this all works.
Or if you're a person of color too. If you're in marginalized communities, forget about it. It's like wealth and how to manage your finances is not something that you learn. Period.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of truthful information floating. The media doesn't help neither. There's no truth, and I think that's the way the system was built for the benefits of others and the marginalization of others as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So here we are today after 1971, the experiment of paper money that can be inflated to as much as we want, right?
Clearly,
so we have this currency that has no end value, essentially, as much as it can be created. And when more is created, all of our savings and all the money we have today is worth less, right? Because you're just, all of us have a piece of the pie, and when you add more to the pie, everyone gets a diluted share of it. So after the last housing crisis in 2007, the banks responded by lowering interest rates to zero, at or near zero, and lending to the banks and corporations over the last 10 years in the hope to re-stimulate the economy, what they called quantitative easing. And that was an experiment. It was an experiment because in '07, the system should have really collapsed, and the central bank stepped in and they tried to do everything they could at a last resort to bail everyone out. But all we've seen over the last 10 years is an increase in the money supply that was lent to other businesses and large corporations that was supposed to trickle through those businesses down to working Americans to stimulate spending, increase wages. But what we've seen after 10 years now is that money was kept up at the top. Companies bought back shares with all of that income instead of paying employees, which boosted their stock prices. Business executives, banking executives got very large payouts. And we've now seen the wealth gap as wide as it's been since the 1930s. So we are now back in this neo-feudal kind of state where the top of the pyramid gets all the wealth and the bottom 90% has to, share their small portion.
Yeah, now, and fight against each other too, on top of it all, because it's like, no, it's for me.
Yeah. Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a system that, has existed since the U.S. took its stage as world power after World War II. This is typically what happens. If you look over the last 1,000 years of history, every 80 to 120 years or so, there's an existing world power. When there's a changing world power, sometimes there's conflict, sometimes there's not. But typically, the world power that's in place has the privilege of being the reserve currency of the world as well, right? So, this system started for the U.S. in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. That's when we backed the dollar by gold. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. We had a free-floating currency. We could make as much of it as we wanted. And after 30 or 40 years of malinvestment and building up a lot of debt and credit, we had first the housing crisis in '07, and now we're having the bubble of all bubbles that we're seeing with the credit crisis. Now, and this ties into the currency as well, because the dollar was allowed to be you can make as much of it as you want, right? But what Mike and I believe are happening right now is that we will be transitioning off of the current financial system that we've known since 1944 and transitioning off of the reserve currency that we've had since the U.S. has been a superpower since 1944. And we know this because of the debt issues we're seeing right now in the economy. There's a shortage of dollars, and there's also a massive amount of debt. And people are in a position right now where they're defaulting on debt. Businesses are going bankrupt because they can't service their debt. It's debt built on debt, built on debt, built on fake money. So Mike and I have been very passionate about this subject. We are former veterans, so we do believe ultimately in freedoms for individuals, and that ties into the currency, that ties into savings, and it also ties into online privacy. So as we're moving into this next phase in this next digital economy, we think there's an argument here that the next reserve currency of the world will be a digital currency that will operate off of a blockchain. We're here today to talk about what the potentials are for that reserve currency. The Federal Reserve, as we speak right now, is coming up with its own digital dollar on a program that's supposed to be working off FedNow. I know Mike can talk a little bit more. China has been building up their digital yuan now for about 2 years, and they're actively testing it in China with companies like Starbucks and McDonald's. So there's a hidden currency race right now going on around the world that no one really knows about. We hear trade war, but it's ultimately not trade. It's a currency war on top of a trade war. The currency war causes the trade war, right? Because the Chinese are valuing the yen, which is causing the trade war. And the saying is, currency wars lead to trade wars, lead to hot wars. So Mike and I have been really watching and trying to understand how this is changing and how people can prepare themselves, which is why we're so passionate about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the digital gold. There's only 21 million that will ever exist. You can break this down 100 million decimal places. So the best explanation I can give is the dollar can only be broken down to a penny, right? That's the smallest fraction of a dollar. A Bitcoin can be broken down 100 million decimal places, so it's 7 decimal places out. So this was a technology that was a response against the banking occupation. It was a response to crony capitalism, but more importantly, it was a gift to the people because as we live in this world where governments can decide how they want to inflate the currency and we can lose our savings in a matter of months, we now have an alternative that we can save in and transact in that has a fixed supply that's deflationary, just like gold, and that can help us navigate these really unstable times in the economy. And that's what we've been trying to do the last couple of months, is educate people on these new digital currencies for preservation of wealth and also for their own individual sovereignty online.
Right, but then how do you use it? So from a practical standpoint, like I don't have any of the 21 million Bitcoin that exists, right? Because you told me it's a finite number, right?
Yes.
So then, how many people are involved in this movement, or whatever you want to call it, or this trend, or this new way? I don't know how to, tag it at this point. And number two, once you have some of these assets or Bitcoins or electronic currency, how do you even use it? And, like in which platforms? I mean, you told me, like, for example, in China, they're practicing with the yuan. You said it's like a electronic or digital currency.
Yeah, digital yuan. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So with two major U.S. companies, so does that exist here too in the U.S.?
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to remind people that where Bitcoin stands right now in the blockchain industry as a whole, it's very early. It's as if we were in the 80s right now with the modern day internet that we know today. But over the past 10 years, primarily the last 2 years, a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators have gotten involved in the space, and they've created a lot of tools that make it very easy for people to buy, save, and spend in Bitcoin on a day-to-day operation. The number one platform that I turn people to in the United States right now, as an example, is the Cash App. So if anyone has a Cash App, have you heard of the Cash App?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So
I have the Cash App.
Perfect. Yeah.
I use it.
Jack Dorsey is the owner of Cash App. He's also the owner of Square Payments and Twitter. Jack Dorsey is a very, very big supporter of Bitcoin. So the Cash App Bitcoin integration happened about a year ago, I think. So you can download the Cash App right now, and on your bottom menu, if you go over 2 spaces to the right, you have the ability to purchase Bitcoin if you would like. You have to go into your actual account and just turn that feature on, but it exists within the Cash App.
And how much does it cost?
You can buy a penny of a Bitcoin if you want. You could buy $1 of a Bitcoin if you want. People get stuck on the whole, one Bitcoin costs $9,000, so I can't afford it. No, that's incorrect. You can purchase a fractional amount of these Bitcoins. So, for example, if you wanted to buy $5 worth of Bitcoin, you're going to get the exchange rate of dollars for Bitcoin, whatever that exchange rate is. So,
and the 21 million, exactly. They're going to break it down amongst how many people have Bitcoin so far, and then you're going to get that part.
Yeah. So Bitcoin trades on the market just like gold, right? And I like to relate it to gold as a commodity because it's the same thing, right? Gold exists. Gold exists in the world today. You can buy gold anywhere, from a pawn shop, from an online gold exchange, but it's priced against the U.S. dollar, right? So gold's price is always fluctuating, and that's because there's a fixed amount of gold,
right?
And so its price is going to change on demand, right? Supply and demand. If it's more popular, it's going to be worth more in dollars. Bitcoin works in the same way. So it has a fixed supply, just like gold. No one controls it. No government controls it. No company controls it. This is just like email. No one owns email. It's an open source software where someone hit enter online one day and anyone can use it and download it. So Bitcoin is not controlled by anyone, and you can purchase up to as much as you want based off the current exchange rate of Bitcoin. So if you can only buy, $5 at a time or $1 at a time, that's fine. You'll get 0.00 whatever.
Okay, but where do those $5 go?
So they go to the company that's selling you the Bitcoin. So in this case, first Cash App, it's going to Jack Dorsey with Cash App. The money, the $5 is going up.
Okay, so he has the gold. So he has the gold. He has a supply of gold. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to. And so what you mentioned already, blockchain a couple of times. What does that mean?
Blockchain is the underlying technology that makes all of this stuff work, right? So with Bitcoin, I can send you a Bitcoin payment just like I can send you a text. So on the Cash App, we could go into our Bitcoin section and click send. I give you an address to my account. You put it in your app and you send me how much ever Bitcoin you want. And then you can show the dollar equivalent. And it gets to me just like a text message. And it's there, it settles. There's no one in between us that had to process that. There's no bank that had to process it for us. There's no credit card company. It happens all on its own online.
Okay, but in the but I'm sorry. Well, yes.
No.
Go with the blockchain.
Yeah.
So the blockchain,
is the actual. It's the network itself that's actually validating these transactions and doing this for us. So
Got
the blockchain
okay.
is the underlying.
So it's like the vetting process. It's the vetting that this is legit, and then this has happened and it's squared off and we're good. And
correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because then it triggered another question, which was, okay, so then in the Cash App, I could do it through Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when I do use cash, then that's where the bank is involved because it's linked into, like I have to pull it out and all of that. So that's the difference of using that one application, but using two different platforms.
Exactly. And we're seeing this, and this here in the West, here in the United States, we're very lucky, because we have the ability, we have the privilege of having the reserve currency of the world. We have a functioning financial system. We have bank accounts, right? There's an underserved population of Americans, like the homeless or those that may not have permanent addresses or anything, that can't have a bank account. But for the most of us, we can, right? But if you go to any developing nation or any country that's gone through hyperinflation, they understand very quickly the meaning of money and inflation and who controls that.
Right.
And also the ability to send money without any friction. So let me give you an example, because this is very powerful. Right now, I know someone that has family members in the Philippines, and he sends them back a fixed amount of money each month to help support the cost of living back home in the Philippines. Up until Bitcoin was created, how he would do that is by going and sending a MoneyGram, or going and sending a Western Union, or sending a wire through his bank account. But that takes a week's time, and you're paying extremely high fees, sometimes with MoneyGram, like 5-10%.
Yeah.
Right? And then maybe there's trouble on their banking side, right? But what he's been able to do is his family in the Philippines have downloaded a Bitcoin application, a wallet, that it's the same thing as a bank account. Like when you go in your Cash App and you click on your Bitcoin and you see how much you have, that's what we call a wallet. So they could download an app, which is a wallet, and they send him their address. And every month he clicks send to send the payment, and they have it within 15 minutes. It's there. No one stopped it. It's settled, and they paid pennies for that transaction. So this is where we see now where, this programmable form of money, that's where we see how powerful it is when it comes to, having a borderless, frictionless experience, and you can program this, and it's got a fixed supply. And who's on board? You're asking. This is another important thing to realize as well, is that, if you watch CNBC or the mainstream news networks, they're not going to fill you in on what's going on, in behind the scenes, right? Typically, once it hits CNBC or the mainstream news, it's too late for investors. Smart money doesn't want Main Street to know what's going on before it happens. Well, back here in the U.S., the New York Stock Exchange, the company that owns the New York Stock Exchange is ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange. They just started a platform called BACT, BAAKT, about a year ago, which is it's merging institutional investors with crypto now. They are custodial, because the biggest complaint with companies like I worked for 2 years ago, especially with their pension accounts, is they wanted exposure to Bitcoin because it's not correlated to the stock market. It's got a fixed supply. It's a great hedge against inflation and downturn in the markets, but they didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know how to store it. They didn't know how to manage it. Well, the New York Stock Exchange just solved that problem. And Paul Tudor Jones is a very well-known billionaire hedge fund investor. 2 weeks ago, he just announced that he's got 2% of his portfolio. He's moving into Bitcoin. You've got pension funds now during the economic crisis. They don't know where to put their money because they need to get a return for their for people that have pensions.
Right.
And now they're using the New York Stock Exchange for that to actually happen into Bitcoin. So I think in about a year and a half's time, This will be a much different story. I think institutional money and pension accounts will have already had exposure, and I think we're just before that wave now.
Right. I can see the value in removing the middleman. I'm from Puerto Rico, and when Maria happened, I know that locally there was at least one town that was establishing their own currency. They're like, screw everybody else. We don't trust the government. We don't trust outsiders. We don't trust, and so we're going to take, and develop our own currency. I don't know the details of what that actually looked like, but I kind of, I admired, their cojones, right? To say, you know what, screw everybody. We're just gonna, do our own thing, right? And so if you wanted to deal with them, right? And I know, Mike, you we were talking about this off, the recording, because I do see some value in this, but won't I mean, people are involved in this. Won't it get corrupt in some way, shape, or form?
Well, that's the reason why a system like this would work better than, because what cryptocurrency is a decentralized system. So it doesn't center around one. Let's say, like right now, we have the Federal Reserve Bank. They print the money. So anything that has to do with the dollar, they are the ones in charge of it. When you decentralize it, especially amongst individuals, you and I are equal. The currency is between you and I, because you and I are the ones that own it, not some central government or private corporation like the Federal Reserve Bank is. So let's say in this case, Puerto Rico, right, when you had a town looking for a way to create its own currency, which is digital currency, which is a decentralized platform. What they're doing is, as a community, they're owning a currency amongst themselves, peer-to-peer, decentral. So if there is a person, let's say there's a group that wants to control, right, the digital currency. It's pretty hard because they're a peer, so they still have to deal with others that have the currency as well. So you wouldn't have to, manipulate everyone that has that.
Right.
Because there's no boss, there's no pyramid, there's no person on top handling it. It's everyone's peer-to-peer, which is what the blockchain does. You have blocks, like I'm a block, you're a block. If we are mining it, we're creating it. You and I are equal. You're an individual as I am as well. So it gives power amongst individuals away from power, right? So that's in this concept, right? Let's say in Puerto Rico, that concept works well because Puerto Rico already has an issue. It's a colony, right? The colony that has already a broken financial system, and on top of that, it's dependent on a larger financial system, which is the United States, which is also broken. You have a double whammy there. Now, if you have your own cryptocurrency, let's say whichever they were talking about, one called Sol, that's OL. If they were to have this now, this is where crypto becomes important, because people look at crypto like Bitcoin and all that because it's worth something right now. People look at it like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 per, right? So people are looking at it as an investment. But the practicality to it, the real necessity is that it's not that it's an investment, it's like protection. So let's say right now the United States dollar, since they're printing so much of it, it will go down in value. The majority of things that we buy as Americans and, whatever, is we buy everything from other countries, let's say China, let's say India. If, let's say for some reason, China starts to increase prices, right now, there is a saying that China deflates their prices so that they can sell more and become more competitive globally.
Right, volume,
Yeah, now if they shift, if they want to increase the value of their currency plus the value of the products they create, and since they control the majority of the world's production, let's say we need to start buying goods, and they push the value of it. Now, let's say if let's say a TV costs $500, now it could cost $5,000. That's with anything. That's with any good. What that means is that our dollar is buying less because their currency has went up. So to protect against that, we need to look at our currency, the U.S. dollar. It's a fiat currency that's been printed over and over and over again, so the value keeps going down. If that continues to go, we're going to have hyperinflation. So everything that we buy every day will go up in price 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't know how many days to go. So to protect against that before that happens, it's good to spread your money into different goods. So that's crypto, precious metals. You got gold, platinum, silver. You got Bitcoin, Monero. So if you take, let's say you have $5,000, and you're like, I want this just in case. In case part, you should look at alternatives. You look at Bitcoin. You buy Bitcoin. You buy a percentage of it. You keep it there. So the moment that something happens with the dollar and it goes down, well, you know what? That's going to go up.
Right.
We've already learned that with every economic downturn that we've had over the last couple of years, corrections, it's gone. Because what it's supposed to do is protect against the valuation of your currency. Because right now, if you have, let's say you have $10,000 in the bank, and that's your savings, and something happens with the economy, there's inflation comes, now you can't really purchase that $10,000.
Won't last. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you keep the value? By looking at an alternative. That's where Bitcoin comes into the mix.
Right.
Because then that value won't go down. So you could buy what you originally had.
Right.
That currency, not worry about the dollar.
Right. Now I have a quick question though. So in the case of, again, the owner's Cash App, but if he has a lot more, of course, because he has more money to buy more Bitcoin, right? So then it's still kind of, I mean, I understand that peer to peer, but not really, because you got a lot more than I do. So you're kind of controlling stuff, so you are kind of, the leader of the pack, that 1%, how do we avoid that centralization, of then this finite amount of digital currency to fall into the hands of just a few? That's my first question.
Well, and the part with Bitcoin, right now, if we look at the only reason why we have a Cash App that is you're able to buy Bitcoin is because you have the government trying to put regulations in.
Yeah.
And that's been the issue here in America, that they're continuing to find ways to
get in.
To get in and control. They want to control everything.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to educate ourselves about crypto and all the alternatives, because we do not want centralization. That's what the purpose of the government, to try to centralize it.
Right.
And we understand the concept of centralization. Centralization pretty much pushes out everyone else. And so, Cash App is like a brokerage in a way. It's facilitating, but the only reason why it facilitates is because the government keeps putting in regulations and stopping others to freely do this. This is why in Puerto Rico, they're doing these experiments with like a town. They're trying to create a city. Right now, the government of Puerto Rico said that these groups of crypto anarchists, which many are called, people that want to use crypto as a means to gain back freedom and independence from the systems that feed. The government of Puerto Rico says, hey, you could probably use Old San Juan if you want to and do this experiment. This experiment is to put the money back to the people and take it away from government. Government doesn't want that. So we need to pretty much continue to learn how to better this type of system. And we're learning. That's why we have so many other alternative coins. Bitcoin is the main one. But there's many out there. And we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
But it's great that we have these alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One currency for the whole world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, Sammy, it's more about the ability to manipulate the money supply itself. So you talked about centralization of people like Cash App that have all of the first Bitcoin that comes out, and then they spread it to everyone else. There's an element of Bitcoin with the blockchain that we didn't tie into called mining. So there's two sides of this. There's the Bitcoin that's circulating, and then there's the miners, which in order for more Bitcoin to be released into the market, into the world, individuals have to run computers. They have a computer, they link it to the Bitcoin blockchain, and then all of the computer does is run at a very high rate of speed. So those computers are called miners. Those computers are the ones that are going through all the transactions on the blockchain and cryptographically ensuring that no one has spent, more than they say they have. All the transactions are real.
Mm-hmm.
And these miners are rewarded with Bitcoin every 10 minutes. That's called the block reward. So that's how more is released into circulation. So someone like Jack Dorsey with Cash App, they're the equivalent of a gold mining company, right? Because how is gold released into circulation now? You have a mining company that digs gold out of the ground, and then it's melted down, and then it goes and people buy it for jewelry or investment.
Right.
That's how more is released in. That's what Jack Dorsey essentially is doing. But the best thing about gold and Bitcoin is that it can't be manipulated. It is what it is. You cannot spend more than you say you have. One of the easiest solutions that Bitcoin did for us is it solved what's called the double spend problem in finance. So that's when I write you a check and you go to cash it, and then the check bounces and you're like, this person didn't have their money even though they said they did. That's called double spend problem. With Bitcoin, you can't do that. You can't fake a Bitcoin payment. You can't bounce a check. These miners are the ones that are keeping it sound. So yes, there's consolidation in the market as far as the miners, but here's the best thing. Anyone can get a computer and then download the Bitcoin blockchain and start mining themselves and have the ability to receive that Bitcoin from the code and be their own, first recipient of Bitcoin. So Jack Dorsey's doing it. These companies are going to continue to build massive operations around mining Bitcoin and crypto. But people do still have the ability to mine on their own if they wanted to.
Okay, cool. So I have two more questions. So the first one is, why 21 million? Well, I mean, and it's not all released, right? Yet. Is that what I'm getting here?
Yeah, that's correct. There's just a little over 18 million that are released in circulating supply. We just went through the halving. So every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's released to these miners that I was telling you about is cut in half. Every 4 years, it's cut in half. So every 10 minutes, whatever the miners are getting, it's cut in half. Right now, it's around 6 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. 4 years from now, it will be cut to 3.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And this will go on until the year 2140. So the year 2140 is when the last 100th millionth decimal place of a Bitcoin will be mined. And they say that won't even happen then. But the 21 million question, it's a good question. We do know that Satoshi and her, or the group that came up with this, they knew about economics, they knew about finance, they knew about cryptography. And from what I can tell you, I know that for whatever that arbitrage number, 21 million seemed to be enough to actually last this whole time. I think it ties into also if you look at the amount of the global money supply or global debt, essentially, if Bitcoin was to actually overtake that, it would be large enough of a number to, take over the global monetary system now, and then add another 50 years, 60 years to that.
Oh, okay. So it's like an algorithm, almost like an equation, and that they figured out.
Exactly. Yeah. This is all a piece of software online that it runs on its own. This is the trippiest thing too, is that we've never experienced a piece of technology that can operate in its own world online. No one actually controls it. And this is very new for us. But I think as time goes on, people will realize that they actually have a little bit more trust, at least for now, in the code than they do with a banker who's not doing very good things with government policy.
Yeah. And it's like the internet, like you mentioned before. I used to work in media, in publishing, and when online and all of this and websites came up, everyone was like, yeah, whatever. Let's continue to buy print advertising, right? Yeah. And then now it's like magazines are dead. And almost dead, but they're almost gone. Everyone's online, digital media. Finally, advertising companies, are investing more, I think, in digital than they are now on TV and other, more traditional platforms. So, I feel like now I have a little bit more knowledge about this, but I have one big concern. Let's say this all works and this is all, wow, this is where we're going. Now I'm curious, so I'm going to look more into it. Just to be, better equipped. Although I feel like I learned a lot today. What if the internet crashes? We're screwed.
So that problem was actually solved with Bitcoin about 2 years ago. There's a company
really?
called,
Okay, you see, you have all the answers. Okay.
And actually, there's actually a very popular company right now called Locha Mesh, LOCA MESH, Locha Mesh. I believe these individuals are out of, it's either Puerto Rico or South America, and I don't want to confuse the two because, but this individual, I believe, it was Puerto Rico or Venezuela, one of the two. But essentially, Blockstream, this company, about 2 years ago, started launching satellites into space. And right now, even if the internet all shut off, we have the ability right now to still send transactions through satellites. So that's solved. If the internet goes down, there's companies out there that are making it still possible for people to send transactions. The reason why that this project started is because you still have individuals in countries where the governments are oppressive. They'll block the internet. So if I can't get to the internet to send a transaction and my family's welfare is depending on it, they were trying to find a solution around that. So we have the satellite solution, and if it gets worse than that, I think we're going to have to worry a lot more than just Bitcoin, because we're going to.
Well, yeah, no, I'm just thinking. Okay, so my kids are 10 and 13 now, right? So I'm hoping they, I want to, let them know about this thing, right? This digital currency, because I won't be here, but when it's time for like Mad Max, and my kids are like walking around roaming the world, I want to make sure that they know how to access that satellite. That's one. And number two, they also need to learn a trade. I'm almost thinking like, sewing and carpentry and these kinds of trades that you're like, okay, if you give me that banana, I'll, trim, hem your pants or something,
exactly.
So I think we're almost going back to that kind of currency too, in many ways. So
we're going there quicker than we think.
Yeah,
I think here in America we don't look at it that way, right? Because we've been blessed. We've been blessed for a long time.
Yeah,
but you look at Venezuela. Like Venezuela, like back in the 80s, Venezuela was a paradise. One of the most successful Latin American countries.
Yeah.
And now look at them.
Like, well, even Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was hit with Maria, was hit with earthquakes, was hit now with the coronavirus. I'm telling you something, Mad Max and Mado Max. Because when all those people in the Mad Max, they're all Boricuas, I think, because we could survive anything at this point, So, but I mean, I'm saying it in jest, but it's true. It's like you almost have to push yourself to learn certain survival skills and really learn about new trends and things that you might feel uncomfortable talking about, or like we were talking, at the beginning of this podcast. I'm like, Bitcoin, not, but as you learn more about it, at least, now I'm curious. I want to know a little bit more about how it works, and take a deeper dive into the topic, because like print advertising and websites and stuff, I mean, back then, I'm talking about when I started my career, 27 years ago, I'm like, yeah, right, whatever, magazines are going to disappear. And here we are. So.
And it's fast, and it happens faster every year, right?
Yeah.
The things that we don't think they will.
True.
So.
And before we transition to Sammy, I think it's important for the listeners and people to understand as well is you have to have a little bit of an open mind when discussing these topics, because these are topics that we've never experienced in our lifetime. So before we talked about history, Mike and I do a good job of we count history into our analysis of what's going on in the markets in the world. And again, historically, reserve currencies have only really been in power for anywhere from 80 to 120 years. So if you consider the dollar starting in 1944 after World War II, which it did, we're now about there. Like this is a once in a lifetime kind of an occurrence that will happen, a transition of money in currency. And, so that's why people get kind of confused in the beginning, or flags are up because they haven't experienced it, but they wouldn't have experienced it in their lifetime so far. And I try to ask people this too, because sometimes they ask me, my money is digital now. It is. You see it on the bank account. You see it on, your online banking. You spend with PayPal. You spend with Venmo. It's already digital. But the difference is what piece of underlying technology you're going to trust. One with banking that can be manipulated and has been. It could be hacked and it's proven, or Bitcoin, which is a piece of software. It's the same kind of underlying software for a financial system and structure, except it's never been hacked once, and it's been going 10 years. Every 10 minutes, a block reward is happening. So, these are just things we like to try to even tell people.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. No, and I get it. That's why you have to, be, a lot of people, say, oh, she's a little nuts, because I like pushing boundaries and always,
of course,
and at the end of the day is that you don't know what's going to happen with our grandchildren, right? 100 years from now, maybe it'll be a telepathic currency.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You like that?
Elon Musk, right? Musk has the Neuralink.
Yeah.
Neuralink is supposed to connect everybody.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So then it's like this conversation, I'm like, oh my God, that is so backwards. Those people, right? They'll look back at this archive and say, oh my God, aren't they cute? Aren't they cute talking about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So I have a quick question. So with all this said, and Samí, I myself need to look into this more. I've learned a lot from Joe and Mike already. Guys, what are, for like people like Samí and I who know about this but don't know really the details and everything, or for our listeners, what do we need to do? Like, where's the first places to go to
like
get
a safe
information?
Yeah.
So we can learn how to do this. Maybe not to the degree that you guys are involved, but to be comfortable and just understand how to even get involved in the first place.
Yeah, so Mike and I, along with, we have our financial newsletter and podcast called The Nonconformist, but within that, we also educate on these exact topics. But we have two committed educational channels for Bitcoin. One is called Adoption. In the middle, it's got a B, ADOBTION. And that was our play on words. But what we're doing with that one is helping educate others to lead to Bitcoin adoption. So they can go to our website, thenonconformist.io, and there's a crypto tab, and then you'll see Learn Bitcoin and also Learn Monero. They can use that as a resource for general education. We like to try to dumb it. I'm not going to say dumb it down, but we like to try to.
It's okay. We understand that.
Make it easy to understand. Yeah.
Digestible sound.
Digestible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to say, people that I learned from, you can go on YouTube and you can follow an individual named Andreas Antonopoulos. He's a very well-respected individual in the space that's committed to Bitcoin education. That's it. So I'd say, you can listen to us, you can listen to Andreas. We do have a couple tutorials for like the Cash App, and we do have some videos where we just try to explain it to people. But get started with Cash App. Download Cash App, watch a couple of Andreas's videos. The main Bitcoin website is bitcoin.org. They have quite a bit of resources there as well. And that's where I would start, because even if people were able to, start, we're not financial advisors, it's not financial advice, of course, but even if you were able to learn now and then get the Cash App and save a couple bucks a week or something, again, it's a fixed supply. So assuming that more people will be using it next year, it's going to be worth more. So this can be really beneficial, especially in the current environment where we are with the economy, to get started.
That is so volatile. Yeah, that is so, I mean, at this point is like, do you pull your money out of the bank and put it under the mattress? I mean, some people are even considering doing that, so and we've also tried to provide support for small businesses as well and entrepreneurs. So if there's any small businesses out there that want to accept Bitcoin or cryptocurrency payments, it's perfectly legal in the U.S. now. Just like Jack Dorsey with Cash App and Square are building nice user interfaces, an online website, or an in-person store can easily accept Bitcoin now. It's just all on them. There's no exchange risk because it'll integrate, just like now, people can use credit card, Visa, MasterCard, whatever. You can add Bitcoin as an option, and when they pay you, it converts to dollars right away. So there's no exchange risk or anything like that. The best part, too, is there's lower fees. Visa charges you 3.5% on a transaction. Bitcoin payment processors right now are around 1%. And if you do it on your own, which we know how to do, no fees at all. It's just like accepting cash online.
And we also have resources on our website for small business and stuff.
Right, to figure out how much
education
to
on that.
charge in Bitcoin for a service, for example. Yeah.
Correct.
So if I'm gonna design design an ad or a logo, I could find, how much to charge in Bitcoin for that. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Now, if you even care more about your privacy and you want the government's eyes off of your currency, look into Monero. It's even more sophisticated when it comes to privacy. And that's where things get even more, it becomes more important. Especially like Joe and I were really into like privacy and protecting our identity, everything like that. In a world that we live in now, where privacy is actually highly valuable because it's deteriorating every day.
Yeah.
That's another one. Monero. Look into Monero. We have a bunch of resources. We talk a lot about Monero. Monero is something that people don't know about a lot because it's like the Swiss bank account of crypto, and it's under the radar. But that's another one I would really look into. Honestly,
very interesting.
That's actually we think it's going to be the real next.
Right. Okay, cool. So it's like a big, again, what we were saying. Oh, that in the future you'll look back and say, oh, that was just the testing ground. This other thing, because that's how it always happens. Like, remember MySpace? Maybe you're too young for that. But yeah, MySpace, it's like, and then Facebook took over. Yeah, I had a MySpace account. Yeah, right. I didn't really use it because you have to change behavior, right? You need to change behavior.
Your top 10 friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so then Facebook basically took over, and then now you have everybody else. Well, listen, guys, this was amazing. I learned a lot. It was very stimulating conversation. I hope my questions were also, thought provoking. And
yeah, you did wonderful.
And I'll probably, offline, if I have a question, reach out, because now I'm curious. I'm gonna have like this long conversation with my husband and my kids. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something. I bet you anything, I'm gonna mention it to my son Pedro, and he'll probably spit out everything you just said. He's 13, so he probably knows all about it, And I'm like, oh, nice, So anyway, I want to thank you for joining us today, and really, it really is a pleasure to meet you. And then one day when we can meet in person, we'll break bread together. Okay.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Sammy and Chris. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.